Sarah Johnson stood in front of her bathroom mirror, adjusting her police badge for the 100th time that morning. At 35 years old, she was one of the youngest detectives in the Chicago Police Department and one of the few black women to reach this rank. The golden badge sparkled under the bathroom lights, reminding her of all the challenges she had faced to earn it. 10 years ago, when Sarah first joined the police force, many people didn't think she would last more than a few months. Some of her fellow officers would whisper behind her back, saying she only got in because of diversity quotas. But Sarah proved them all wrong, one case at a time. During her first year as a patrol officer, she caught a serial burglar who had been terrorizing local businesses for months. While other officers focused on the fancy alarm systems that were broken into, Sarah noticed something different. She saw that all the targeted shots had their deliveries on the same day. After some investigation, she discovered that the burglar was actually a delivery truck driver who used his job to study the buildings. This smart thinking got her noticed by her superiors. They started giving her more important cases, and she solved them all. Whether it was finding stolen cars, catching drug dealers, or helping scared kids feel safe again, Sarah always did her job with care and intelligence. Chief Michael Reynolds, her boss, became one of her biggest supporters. He saw how hard she worked and how much the community trusted her. Unlike some other officers, Sarah could talk to people from all backgrounds. She knew how to make them feel comfortable and get them to share important information. This skill helped her solve many cases that other officers couldn't crack. Sarah's desk at the police station told her whole story. On one side, she had pictures of her family, her mother who raised her alone while working 2 jobs, her younger sister who was now in medical school, and her nephew who thought his aunt was a superhero. On the other side were her awards and certificates, each one earned through hard work and determination. But what made Sarah special wasn't just that she was good at catching criminals. She also cared about doing things the right way. She never took shortcuts or broke rules, even when it would make her job easier. Some officers didn't like this about her, saying she made them look bad, but Sarah didn't care. She believed that being a police officer meant following the law, not just enforcing it. One morning, while checking some old case files, Sarah found something strange. Some numbers in the department's budget didn't add up. Most people would have ignored it, thinking it was just a small mistake. But Sarah had learned from her mother that small details often told big stories. She decided to look closer at these numbers, not knowing that this decision would change her life forever. That same day, Chief Reynolds called her into his office. He wanted to congratulate her on solving her latest case, where she had caught a group of car thieves. "Johnson," he said with a proud smile, "you're the best detective I've seen in 20 years of police work. Keep this up, and you might have my job someday." Sarah smiled and thanked him, but her mind was still on those strange numbers she had found. As she walked back to her desk, other officers nodded at her with respect. They might not all like her, but they couldn't deny that she was good at her job. Even Officer Thompson, who had given her the hardest time when she first started, now came to her for advice on tough cases. Looking at her computer screen, Sarah opened the file with the suspicious numbers again. Something wasn't right, and she was going to figure out what it was. She didn't know it yet, but she was about to uncover the biggest case of her career, one that would test everything she believed in and force her to choose between loyalty and justice. Little did Sarah know, her commitment to doing the right thing was about to shake the entire Chicago Police Department to its core, and her next case would make headlines across the country. But for now, she was just doing what she always did, following the evidence, wherever it might lead. The autumn wind blew cold through Chicago's streets as Sarah Johnson stayed late at the police station one Thursday evening. Most officers had already gone home, leaving only the quiet hum of computers and the occasional ring of a distant phone. But Sarah couldn't leave. Those strange numbers in the budget files kept bothering her, like an itch she couldn't scratch. She opened her desk drawer and pulled out the sandwich she hadn't eaten at lunch. Taking small bites, she clicked through different files on her computer. The police department's budget was huge, with millions of dollars moving between different accounts. Most people would get lost in all these numbers, but Sarah had always been good with details. Something caught her eye. Every month, exactly $50,000 disappeared from the Special Operations account. The money was then split into smaller amounts and moved to different places. On paper, it looked like normal police business, equipment purchases, training programs, and office supplies. But Sarah noticed these transfers always happened on the 15th of each month, like clockwork. She pulled up some old case files on her computer, ones that had been suddenly closed over the past year. There was the drug bust that almost happened at the harbor, but was cancelled at the last minute. Then there was the investigation into that fancy nightclub that everyone knew was selling drugs, but somehow never got caught. Each case was stopped by orders from above, and each time it happened right after one of those strange money transfers. Sarah's heart started beating faster. She had seen something like this before, back when she was a rookie officer. A corrupt cop in another district had been taking money from drug dealers. He would make evidence disappear and warn the criminals before raids. But this was different. This was bigger. Much bigger. Just then, Officer Rodriguez walked by her desk. "Still here, Johnson?" he asked, surprised to see her. Sarah quickly minimized the files on her computer. "Yeah, just finishing up some paperwork," she said with a calm smile, even though her mind was racing. After Rodriguez left, Sarah opened a new document and started writing down everything she had found. She needed to be careful. If she was right about this, she was looking at corruption at the highest levels of the department. The kind of corruption that could get people killed if they asked too many questions. She remembered something her mother used to say: "Truth is like water. It always finds a way out." But her mother had never dealt with corrupt police officers who could make evidence disappear or make people disappear. Sarah decided to dig deeper, but smartly. She created a special folder on her personal USB drive, copying only the most important files. Then she started looking into the companies that were supposedly getting the transferred money. Many of them looked real on paper, but when she checked their addresses, she found empty buildings or businesses that had nothing to do with police work. The next morning, Sarah went to the evidence room to look at some old files from the canceled drug cases. The officer in charge, Tom Williams, gave her a strange look. "These files are sealed, Detective Johnson," he said, blocking her path. "Chief's orders." "I'm working on a connected case," Sarah lied smoothly. "You can call the chief yourself if you want to check." Williams hesitated, then stepped aside. He knew Sarah was the chief's favorite detective. Nobody wanted to get in her way and risk making the chief angry. Inside the evidence room, Sarah found more pieces of the puzzle. Cases that should have been slam dunks were mysteriously dropped. Drug dealers who should have gone to jail were walking free. And behind it all, there was always money moving between accounts on the 15th of each month. As Sarah walked back to her desk, she saw Chief Reynolds talking to some other officers. He noticed her and smiled warmly, the same way he had when he promoted her to detective. Sarah smiled back, but inside, her stomach was turning. The evidence was pointing to something she didn't want to believe. The corruption went all the way to the top, and her mentor, the man who had helped her career, might be at the center of it all. She sat down at her desk and looked at the family photos she kept there. Her mother's words came back to her again. "Truth is like water." Sarah took a deep breath. She had found the truth, or at least part of it. Now she had to decide what to do with it, even if it meant going against the most powerful person in the Chicago Police Department. Sarah Johnson sat in her car outside a small coffee shop, watching the rain hit her windshield. It was 6:30 a.m., and she had barely slept last night. For the past 2 weeks, she had been living two lives. During the day, she was still the star detective everyone knew, but at night, she dug deeper into the department's dark secrets. Today was different. She was about to meet someone who could help her make sense of everything she had found. Through careful digging, she had discovered that Maria Torres, a former police accountant, had quit her job suddenly last year. The official story was that she left for family reasons, but Sarah had a feeling there was more to it. Maria walked into the coffee shop right on time. She was a small woman with gray hair, looking nervous as she glanced around the nearly empty shop. Sarah waited 5 minutes, then went inside, just like they had planned in their secret phone call. "The money always moves on the 15th, Maria said quietly, stirring her coffee. "I noticed it too, about a year ago. When I asked questions, they moved me to a different department. Then strange things started happening. My car's brakes failed one day. My house alarm went off for no reason. I got the message and quit." Sarah listened carefully, writing nothing down. She couldn't risk anyone seeing her notes. "Did you ever figure out where the money went?" she asked. Maria's hands shook slightly as she lifted her cup. "Some of it went to companies that don't exist, but most of it It went to places owned by the Ramirez cartel. They control most of the drug trade in Chicago, but somehow they never get caught. Now you know why. Sarah's mind raced. The Ramirez cartel was the biggest criminal organization in the city. If the chief was working with them, it explained a lot. Why certain investigations were stopped. Why some drug dealers went free while others got arrested. The police weren't fighting the drug trade, they were managing it. After leaving Maria, Sarah drove to the library. She couldn't risk using her work computer anymore, and she didn't trust her home internet. At a quiet desk in the back, she used the public computer to create a special email account. She needed to reach out to someone who could help, someone outside the Chicago police. She found the contact information for FBI agent David Chen. He had a reputation for investigating police corruption, and more importantly, for keeping his investigations quiet until he had enough evidence. Sarah sent him a carefully worded email, sharing just enough information to get his attention. That evening, as Sarah walked to her car in the police station parking lot, she noticed Officer Thompson following her. He had been watching her all day, and not in the usual unfriendly way. Something was different. "Everything okay, Thompson?" she asked, turning to face him. He looked uncomfortable. "Just be careful, Johnson." Sarah Johnson couldn't sleep. It was 2 a.m., and she sat at her kitchen table, looking at an old photo. In it, Chief Reynolds stood next to her at her detective ceremony, both of them smiling proudly. That was 3 years ago, when everything seemed simpler. Now, that same photo made her stomach hurt. She remembered the day Chief Reynolds had defended her against Captain Mitchell, who had tried to block her promotion to detective. "Sarah Johnson is the future of this department," Reynolds had said. "If you can't see that, maybe you're the one who doesn't belong here." After that, no one openly challenged her position again. Her phone buzzed. It was a text from Agent Chen, meeting confirmed. They want to move forward. The FBI was ready to build a case against Reynolds and the corrupt officers. All they needed was her official statement and help. Sarah put her phone down and rubbed her tired eyes. On her wall hung a frame with her first badge, next to a photo of her mother. Her mom had worked as a cleaner at the same police station where Sarah now worked. "Baby," she used to say, "being honest isn't about being perfect. It's about doing the right thing even when it hurts." The next morning, Sarah walked into the station, feeling like everyone could see right through her. Chief Reynolds called her into his office, and for a moment, her heart stopped. Had he discovered what she was doing? "Johnson, sit down," he said warmly. "I got good news." He pulled out some papers from his desk. "I'm recommending you for the chief of detectives position. Mitchell is retiring next month, and you're the best person for the job." Sarah felt like she couldn't breathe. Chief of detectives was her dream job. It would make her one of the highest-ranking black female officers in the department's history. And Reynolds was handing it to her, just as the FBI was building a case against him. "Think about it," Reynolds continued. "You've earned this, Sarah. You're like a daughter to me, you know that. I've watched you grow from a rookie into the finest detective this department has ever seen." Walking back to her desk, Sarah felt tears in her eyes. The promotion papers weighed heavy in her hands. Officer Thompson passed by, giving her a concerned look. Even he could tell something was wrong. That evening, Sarah drove to her old neighborhood. She parked outside the community center where she used to play basketball as a kid. Now she watched as young kids played, their parents cheering from the sidelines. This was why she became a cop, to protect places like this, to make sure these kids had a safe neighborhood to grow up in. But the drugs were still here, maybe even more than before. The Ramirez cartel controlled these streets, selling poison to kids while the police looked the other way. All because of dirty money and corrupt cops. Because of the man who had just offered her everything she ever wanted. Her phone buzzed again. It was her sister Lisa. "You okay? You've been quiet since you dropped off that box." Sarah texted back, "Just tired." But she wasn't just tired. She was torn between loyalty and duty, between gratitude and justice. Reynolds had been more than a boss. He had been her mentor, her protector, almost a father figure. He had opened doors that had been closed to people like her for generations. Yet every time she closed her eyes, she saw Maria Torres's shaking hands in the coffee shop. She remembered all the cases that were mysteriously closed, all the drug dealers who went free, all the lives destroyed while corrupt cops got rich. Sarah pulled out her phone again and looked at Agent Chen's message. The FBI was waiting for her decision. She could take the promotion, look the other way like so many others had done, or she could bring it all down. The corruption, the lies, and the man who had helped her achieve her dreams. As the sun set over the basketball court, Sarah watched the kids playing one last game. A young black girl made a perfect shot, and everyone cheered. The girl smiled proudly, just like Sarah had once smiled in that photo with Reynolds. She picked up her phone and texted Chen back. "I'm in. Let's do this." Sometimes doing the right thing meant losing everything you thought you wanted. But as her mother always said, being honest isn't about being perfect. It's about doing the right thing even when it hurts. The basement office of the FBI building was cold and plain, nothing like the busy police station where Sarah usually worked. Agent Chen spread out photos and documents across a large table while two other FBI agents typed notes on their laptops. So every month, $50,000 disappears from the Special Operations account, Sarah explained, pointing to the bank records. The money gets split into smaller amounts and sent to fake companies. All of these companies are connected to the Ramirez cartel. Agent Chen nodded, his face serious. "And you're sure Chief Reynolds is behind this?" Sarah pulled out more papers from her folder. "These transfers need approval from the highest level. And look at these cases. All major drug busts that got cancelled at the last minute. Each cancellation happened right after one of these money transfers." For the next 3 weeks, Sarah lived a double life. During the day, she worked her regular cases at the police station, smiling at Chief Reynolds and pretending everything was normal. At night, she met with the FBI, helping them understand years of corruption and cover-ups. One evening, as she was leaving the FBI building through a back door, she saw a familiar car parked across the street. It was Officer Thompson's personal vehicle. Sarah's heart started racing, but she kept walking normally to her car. Had Thompson followed her? Was he working for Reynolds? The next day at the station, Thompson stopped by her desk. "Nice night for a drive yesterday," he said quietly, but instead of threatening her, he slipped her a piece of paper. "I've seen things too. Call this number when you're ready." The paper had a phone number and 3 words. "We're with you." Sarah soon discovered she wasn't alone. Other officers had noticed strange things over the years, but had been too scared to speak up. With Thompson's help, more officers secretly came forward, sharing their stories with the FBI. Maria Torres, the former accountant, provided all her old records. A janitor who worked late nights had seen suspicious meetings in the chief's office. Even Captain Mitchell, who had once tried to block Sarah's promotion, shared security camera footage that showed known drug dealers entering the police station through a back door late at night. But building the case wasn't easy. One morning, Sarah found her car's tires slashed. Another day, someone broke into her apartment while she was at work. Nothing was stolen, but all her photos were turned face down, a clear message. The worst came when her sister Lisa called in tears. Someone had followed her son home from school. "They didn't do anything," Lisa said, her voice shaking. "They just wanted us to know they could." Sarah wanted to quit right then, but Agent Chen had a plan. The FBI moved Lisa and her son to a safe house outside the city. They also gave Sarah a special phone that couldn't be tracked and taught her new routes to drive home each day. The evidence kept growing. Bank records showed that Reynolds had bought 3 houses in different states under fake names. They found offshore accounts filled with millions of dollars. Security cameras caught trusted police officers meeting with known drug dealers in parking lots and empty warehouses. "We're almost ready," Agent Chen told Sarah one night. "But we need one more thing. We need to catch them in the act. Can you help us set that up?" Sarah thought about everything that had happened. The threats, the fear, her family in hiding. She thought about her mother, who had taught her to always do the right thing. She thought about all the young officers who had come forward, risking their careers to help her. "Yes," she said firmly. "I know exactly how to do it." She pulled out a calendar and pointed to a date. "The 15th is coming up. That's when they always move the money. And I know Reynolds keeps all his access codes in a special notebook in his desk. I've seen him use it." Agent Chen leaned forward. "Are you suggesting what I think you're suggesting?" Sarah nodded. "We're going to catch him right in the middle of a transfer. But we have to be careful. Reynolds isn't just corrupt, he's smart. If he suspects anything, he'll destroy everything." As she drove home that night, Sarah felt both scared and determined. The next few days would be the most dangerous of her life. But for the first time since this all began, she could see the end in sight. Justice was finally within reach. The morning of April 15th started like any other day at the Chicago Police Department. Sarah Johnson arrived at 7:30 a.m. carrying her usual coffee cup. But today was different. Hidden in her jacket was a tiny microphone, and FBI agents were positioned in buildings all around the station. Everything set. Agent Chen's voice crackled quietly in her hidden earpiece. Yes, Sarah whispered while pretending to sip her coffee. She knew the plan by heart. Today was when Reynolds always made his monthly money transfer to the cartel. They just had to catch him in the act. At 9 a.m., Sarah put the first part of their plan into action. She rushed into Reynolds' office, looking worried. "Chief, we got a problem. Someone just called in a threat against the mayor. They're saying something about an attack at his charity event tonight." Reynolds looked up from his computer, concerned. "What kind of threat?" "It's serious, sir." The caller mentioned the Ramirez cartel, said they're planning something big. Sarah watched Reynolds' face carefully. She saw the tiny flash of panic in his eyes. "I'll handle this personally," Reynolds said, standing up. "Get me everything we have on the threat." Sarah hurried back to her desk, knowing what would happen next. Reynolds always used major incidents as cover for his illegal activities. With everyone focused on the mayor's security, he would think it was safe to make his monthly transfer. Through her earpiece, Sarah heard FBI agents reporting Reynolds' movements. He went to his car, made 3 phone calls, then came back to his office. Just as they predicted, he was setting things up. At 11:30 a.m., Thompson walked past Sarah's desk. "Package is in position," he said quietly, meaning he had planted the fake evidence they needed in Reynolds' car. Sarah waited until 1 p.m., when most officers would be at lunch. Then she made her move. She knocked on Reynolds' office door, carrying a stack of papers about the fake threat. "Come in, Johnson," Reynolds called out. He was sitting at his computer, looking tense. As Sarah entered, she saw exactly what she'd hoped to see. His special notebook was open on his desk, and his computer showed the department's banking website. "Sir, I got the security plans for tonight," she said, walking closer. Through her hidden camera, the FBI could now see Reynolds' computer screen clearly. "Just put them there," Reynolds said, distracted. He was typing numbers into the computer. Account numbers that would transfer money to the cartel's fake companies. Sarah placed the papers down and pretended to adjust them, giving the FBI a perfect view. Reynolds entered the final numbers and clicked transfer. "Now," Agent Chen's voice commanded in her ear. Sarah stood up straight and pulled out her badge. "Chief Michael Reynolds," she said in a clear, strong voice. "You're under arrest." Reynolds looked up, confused. Then understanding and anger flashed across his face. "What the hell do you think you're doing, Johnson?" The office door burst open. FBI agents rushed in, followed by Thompson and other officers who had been helping with the investigation. Reynolds tried to close his computer, but it was too late. They had everything on video. "We have proof of you transferring police funds to known criminal organizations," Sarah said, her voice steady even though her heart was racing. "We have records of every payment, every canceled investigation, every deal you made with the cartel." Reynolds looked at her with cold eyes. "I made you," he snarled. "Everything you are is because of me." Sarah shook her head. "No, everything I am is because I believe in justice, and today, justice means arresting you." As Sarah read Reynolds his rights, other FBI agents were already seizing his computer and files. Thompson found a gun hidden in Reynolds' desk, one that wasn't registered. In his car, they discovered the planted evidence plus something they hadn't expected: documents showing connections to corrupt officials in City Hall. News cameras were waiting outside as Sarah led Reynolds out in handcuffs. Officers stopped what they were doing and watched in shock as their chief, one of the most powerful men in Chicago law enforcement, was arrested by the detective he had mentored. That evening, as Sarah finished filing her reports, Thompson brought her a cup of coffee. "You did it," he said quietly. "You actually did it." Sarah looked at the empty chief's office across the hall. "No," she replied. "We did it. All of us who chose to do the right thing." But this wasn't the end. Sarah knew that tomorrow would bring new challenges. Reynolds had friends in high places, and the Ramirez cartel wouldn't go down without a fight. The real battle was just beginning. The day after Chief Reynolds' arrest, Sarah Johnson walked into a police station that felt completely different. Officers whispered in corners, some looking at her with respect, others with anger. The chief's office was sealed with yellow crime scene tape, and FBI agents were still going through every file and computer. Sarah's phone wouldn't stop ringing. News reporters from all over the country wanted to interview her. The story was everywhere. Black female detective brings down corrupt police chief. Some headlines called her a hero, others called her a traitor. Her email inbox was full of messages, death threats mixed with thank you notes from citizens. "You should see what they're saying on TV," Officer Thompson said, showing her his phone. A news anchor was talking about how the case could uncover corruption in other police departments across the country. Another channel showed angry protesters outside the courthouse where Reynolds was being held, but there were also people holding signs that said, "Thank you, Sarah Johnson," and "Black women leading change." Mayor Wilson called an emergency press conference. Sarah watched from her desk as he appeared on TV, looking nervous. "This is a dark day for Chicago," he said, "but also a day that shows how one brave officer can make a difference." What the mayor didn't know was that the FBI was already looking into his office too, thanks to the documents found in Reynolds' car. Sarah's sister Lisa and her nephew were finally able to come home from the safe house. When Sarah visited them that evening, her nephew ran up and hugged her. "My friends at school say you're a superhero, Aunt Sarah," he said excitedly. But not everyone was celebrating. Some older officers turned their backs when she walked by. A few even cleaned out their desks and quit, knowing they might be next to be investigated. The blue wall of silence, the unwritten rule that cops don't turn in other cops, had been broken, and some would never forgive her for that. The hardest moment came when Reynolds' wife visited the station. She found Sarah in the break room. "He talked about you all the time," Mrs. Reynolds said, her voice shaking. "He really thought of you as his daughter." Then she put a small box on the table. It was the birthday gift Reynolds had bought for Sarah last month, before everything happened. Sarah couldn't sleep that night. She sat in her apartment, looking at the unopened gift. On TV, experts were discussing how many more arrests might come from this case. The Ramirez cartel's operations were falling apart as more corrupt officers came forward with information. Even some city officials were starting to confess, hoping to make deals before they got caught. The next morning, the new acting chief, Patricia Martinez, called Sarah into the office, the same office where she had arrested Reynolds just days ago. "The FBI wants to create a special task force," Martinez said. "They want officers who aren't afraid to investigate corruption, even when it's found in high places. They'd asked for you to lead it." Sarah thought about everything that had happened. She thought about the young officers who had secretly helped her, risking their careers. She thought about Maria Torres, who had lost her job for trying to expose the truth. She thought about her mother, who had always taught her to stand up for what was right. "When do I start?" Sarah asked. "There's something else," Martinez added. "We've been getting calls from other police departments across the country. They want you to come and teach their officers about standing up to corruption. You've started something bigger than Chicago, Detective Johnson." As Sarah walked back to her desk, she saw a group of young police academy cadets touring the station. They stopped and stared at her with wide eyes. One young black female cadet stepped forward. "Detective Johnson," she said nervously, "I just wanted to say, you're the reason I decided to become a police officer. You showed us that one person can make a difference." Sarah smiled, remembering when she was just a cadet herself, dreaming of making a difference. Now she had done it, but not in the way she ever expected. The price had been high, losing her mentor, making enemies, putting her family in danger. But when she looked at those cadets' faces, she knew it had been worth it. The truth had found its way out, just like water, just like her mother always said it would. 1 year after Chief Reynolds' arrest, Sarah Johnson stood at a podium in Washington, D.C. The room was filled with police officers, FBI agents, and government officials from across the country. Behind her was a large screen showing the words National Police Reform Conference. "Change doesn't start with big announcements or new laws," Sarah said into the microphone. "It starts with one person choosing to do the right thing, even when it's hard. Then another person joins them, and another, until doing the right thing becomes the normal thing." The Chicago Police Department looked very different now. The new chief, Patricia Martinez, had worked with Sarah to create new rules about reporting corruption. Any officer who saw something wrong could report it anonymously, and a special team would investigate. Officers who helped expose corruption would be protected and rewarded, not punished. The Ramirez cartel had fallen apart. Without corrupt police protection, their drug operations couldn't survive. Many of their leaders were now in jail, and the streets where Sarah grew up were safer than they had been in years. Reynolds' trial had ended 3 months ago. He was found guilty of corruption, drug trafficking, and money laundering. As they led him away to begin his 20-year sentence, he had looked at Sarah one last time. But instead of anger, she saw something different in his eyes. Maybe respect, maybe regret. Sarah's own life had changed in ways she never expected. She traveled around the country, teaching other police departments how to fight corruption. Young officers, especially women and minorities, looked up to her as a role model. She even wrote a book about her experience, which was now required reading at many police academies. But the thing that made her most proud happened in her old neighborhood. The community center where she used to play basketball as a kid had started a new program called Future Leaders in Law Enforcement. Every week, Sarah visited to talk with young people who were interested in becoming police officers. Detective Johnson, a teenage girl, asked during one of these sessions, "Weren't you scared when you had to arrest your boss?" Sarah thought carefully before answering. "Yes, I was scared, but being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you do what's right even when you are scared." Back at the Chicago Police Department, things weren't perfect, but they were better. Thompson had been promoted to lead the anti-corruption unit Sarah had helped create. Maria Torres got her old job back, with a promotion and an official apology. Even some of the officers who had initially turned their backs on Sarah now admitted she had done the right thing. Sarah's mother's old saying about truth being like water had spread throughout the department. Officers would remind each other, "Truth finds a way." It had become a kind of motto for the new generation of police officers. One evening, as Sarah was leaving work, she saw a familiar face, Captain Mitchell, the man who had once tried to block her promotion to detective. He was retiring after 30 years on the force. "Johnson," he called out to her, "I was wrong about you. You didn't just earn your place here. You made all of us better at our jobs. You made this whole department better." Sarah smiled and shook his hand. Then she walked to her car, thinking about how much had changed. The photograph of her and Reynolds at her detective ceremony was still on her desk, but now it meant something different. It reminded her that doing the right thing isn't always easy, and that sometimes the hardest person to stand up to is someone you respect. As she drove home, Sarah passed the courthouse where everything had ended a year ago. The protesters were long gone, but something new had taken their place, a small plaque on the courthouse wall. It read, "Integrity is not about being perfect. It's about doing the right thing even when it hurts." Sarah recognized the words. They were her mother's, slightly changed. She had used them in her testimony at Reynolds' trial, and now they were permanently part of the city's history. Just like the truth, they had found their way out. That evening, as she helped her nephew with his homework, he asked her, "Aunt Sarah, do you miss being just a regular detective?" Sarah thought about everything that had happened, the fear, the danger, the hard choices, but also the changes she had helped create, the lives she had touched, the department she had helped rebuild. "No," she said, smiling, "because now I get to help make sure other officers can be the kind of police we all deserve."